Hi, everyone. My name is Bill Goleman, and I'm recording little snippets of information that I've been learning as I've been doing research um, of, of the Goleman family. This was work that was started by my father, Lyle Goleman, and I've been entering the information into an application called My Heritage. And I will definitely make that link available, and it's available read only. Anybody can go in and look at all the data that I've put in there and things I've recorded in there. Today, we're going to start with one of the people who I have the most information on. This was my grandfather. His name was John Leslie Goleman, and he was born in a part of Illinois called Union Township. Let me share my screen here. Union Center, I'm sorry. Right here. He lived on a rural farm down, you can see where I'm swirling the pointer. He was born to Ham. His father's name was Hamilton, and his mother's name was Emma Dobbins. And they lived on a subsistence farm in rural Illinois. I'm not sure the origin of the farm or how it came into their family, but it was pretty remote. He was one of three boys. He was the middle son, and he was born without the use of his legs. So his legs were there, but they were not functional. And we think that was because of something called milk disease, where the cows on their farm had been eating a snake root plant, and that's what caused the birth defect. His mother, Emma, died in complications with childbirth for a little girl who was born 7 years after Leslie. So obviously, he was very distraught over it. You can imagine he had a very close relationship with his mother, as she had to take extra care of him, having a small child with a defect on a rural farm. So we know this because he published an autobiography. It was a draft autobiography. Oops, sorry, I'm going to go back out. It was a draft autobiography that he started writing before he went in to have his legs amputated. And in it, he talks about with typhoid, his day-to-day life. It's a very interesting read. He uses a lot of the colloquial language of the time. He's very well written, despite not having very much formal education. You can imagine it was hard for him to get back and forth to school. But a lot of his life, day-to-day activities are documented in this draft autobiography that he has published, or that he wrote. He also talks about the funeral costs and some hardships that his family, or that his dad, went through with having to pay for the funeral of his mom, and then having some sort of an illness that took some of his cows, and he lost his cows, and the crops weren't good, and he had these three boys that he's trying to raise by himself. You can just imagine the difficulties he went through. He said that there were many days when he couldn't go to school because he couldn't get to school. So the older and younger boy would go on to school, and he would have to stay home if it was raining, or if his dad was busy with other parts of the farm or whatever. Part of the difficulty in getting around was that he would kind of have to crawl or drag himself along the ground. And so he always wore gloves. And in the winter, he would talk about putting his hands in cans from canned vegetables or fruits to keep his hands dry when he would push himself along the ground. Um, One other thing that he really liked to do was to preach. I guess they must have gone to church, and in the yard, he would climb up on a stump, and he would quote scriptures to the other kids, and he would give sermons to them while standing on a or sitting on a stump. And apparently he was pretty good at it, because he was pretty well known for that. Um, Over time, the people in the town or around the school, I think they felt sorry for him, and wanted to help out. So they all pitched together and gave his dad a pony for Leslie to ride to school. And they had trained the pony to sort of bow down, and put her head down near the ground. And Leslie would grab onto the mane, and then the horse would stand, and he would swing up onto the horse's back. And there were a few people. I know Dad always talked about people in the town and neighbors and things saying they loved watching him do that. And apparently he got pretty good at it. Then when he was 16 years old, around 1912, someone, after his typhoid bout, one of the doctors came back to the house and said that the county had money that they could use to do surgery on his legs and actually amputate his legs. And they talked to him about it, him and his father, and told him that he was very concerned that people of the county were going to have to pay for him to have his legs amputated, and he didn't want to be a burden on anyone. But they explained to him that the money was already allocated and it would just go to waste if nobody used it, and they thought he was a good candidate for it. So he ended up traveling from his house down here to Greenup. That was one day's travel. And then they got on a train, and he went with this doctor into Effingham, which is the county seat. And that's where they were going to do the surgery. So he made a couple trips. It was interesting to see that the first trip he made was by himself with this doctor. And I guess it's probably not unusual. I mean, he was like 16 years old. And after contemplating it, I mean, he was very nervous and scared about going under surgery. He'd never done anything like that before, but taking the long-term view, I think he was very concerned that he did not want to be a burden to his brothers. When he got older, he wanted to be independent and on his own. So he consented to the surgery. And in that autobiography, the autobiography is very interesting. He talks about his concerns about before the surgery, hoping that things were going to work out, and not wanting to die in the surgery. But apparently at the time, in around 1917, there were the surgeons were pretty good at taking care of amputations for the Civil War veterans and World War I veterans by this time. And I think they were pretty good at it. And they thought that he'd be able to use artificial limbs, and they would have some legs for him. So he went ahead with the surgery, but in the end, he decided the prosthetics just got in the way. They were not very good at the time, and he had the leg stumps and no longer had the long legs that he had to drag behind him. So he was able to move much easier, and his upper body was of course very strong from getting around when he was dragging the dysfunctional legs behind him. So having the shorter stumps, they were amputated above the knee. He was able to get around pretty quickly. Let me show you. This is John Leslie. I think this is in 1917 when he was graduating, or he was getting his license to be in the ministry. Here you can see him as an older man, moving around. He always had hands, or gloves on his hands, but he was very strong upper body and very agile. He could get along pretty quickly. So in 1917, he was licensed into the ministry, and began traveling around central Illinois, doing sermons, and he would do these tent revivals. He was a huge fan of somebody who was around at the time named Billy Sunday, who was a very flamboyant evangelist. And I've heard stories that Leslie had a very booming voice, very loud, was easy to hear, didn't have to have a microphone or anything. I guess they didn't have him. And was very entertaining, very funny, had great stories. And Viola, pictured here, was at one of his revivals, a sermon, and fell in love with him, and decided that she wanted to meet him, and they eventually got married. He met her in Lakewood, Illinois, and they were married in 1920 and settled in Oakland. Oakland is pretty close to Union Center. Oakland is just up here. I don't see it. It's just north. It's in this area. And they bought this house. This is Leslie and Viola. And they had 3 little boys. This is Lyle, and Leo is with Viola. Leslie was very proud of this car. So he was very mechanically inclined, and he worked with a local blacksmith to design hand controls. And I believe he had the door on the driver's side taken off, and everybody talked about how quickly and easily he could hop out of the car. And Dad said that they used to ride, the little boys used to ride in the back if they would go with him on his revivals. And he said he never passed someone on the road who was broken down. Someone would have a flat tire or something, and he would just jump down out of the car and go over to him. And because he was on the ground and he was low and very strong, he could easily take the lug nuts off very quickly, pull the tire off, put a new wheel on. And Dad said he would just tell people, just hand me the tire, I'll put it on. I'm already down here. It's really easy for me. And he was very quick, and he'd hop back in the car and take off and say, "Have a great day, neighbor." And he would just be off on the road again. As they got older, the boys, the three brothers, and they were in school together, and they befriended, they had a couple other friends that came home with them. This is Leslie at his church in Oakwood. When they were in high school, Lowell, the oldest, became really good friends with Ernie Stevens. And Ernie had a little brother, and the two of them started hanging out at the Goleman house, and they were orphans at the Soldiers and Sailors home nearby. And so they put together a plan to have these boys stay with them instead of the orphanage. This is an older picture. So this is Bob and Ernie, and the 5 of them, then 5 boys, very close together. And apparently they got really good at basketball. So because there were 5 of them, and they always lived near the church, there was always a church, a basketball hoop in the parking lot of the church. And so they became really good at playing basketball together. And Dad always talked about them playing basketball. This is Leslie. He met a Civil War veteran that had the same artificial legs, and you can see this guy kind of had little rubber ends that he to walk on the ground. Dad said he really got a kick out of meeting this guy, and they became good friends. Yeah, so Leslie pastored various churches in central Illinois during 36 years of his ministry. And he also traveled, and he was also a clerk in town. And he was a county clerk for 26 years also. And they said that the records were incomplete in the early part of his career, but they know that he officiated over 1,000 funerals and over 400 weddings. Yeah, so that's the story. Leslie Goleman. That's all I have for today. Thanks, everybody.